All right, and we are live. Welcome to episode number 18 of the IndieVerse. Today I am here with Chris. Actually, Chris or Christopher, which do you prefer?
Chris. Christopher is just what goes on the book. It sounds more professional.
Awesome. Oh, okay, well, I was unsure, so had to ask, and I feel like I always default to Chris. So um, yeah, but today we are joined by Chris, and he's here to talk all about his novel, but also book marketing and book blurbs specifically. I know that is something that me personally, especially the blurbs part, I struggle with. So we are very happy to be joined by him today. And this is also, we've tried to reschedule this multiple times, and because of me, it has fallen through multiple times. So I appreciate Chris's patience.
No, Caitlin's wonderful. It was both of us. There's a lot of trouble with scheduling these events. Getting two people to agree on anything or any time, it's perfectly understandable.
It's tough. It's tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to actually just turn it over to you, Chris, to introduce yourself for those who might not know you and what it is you do in terms of writing.
Well, despite the troubles, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, Caitlin. And what I do is I write epic fantasy. So this is actually my debut novel, Divinity's Twilight Rebirth, is the first in the Divinity's Twilight series, which is intended to be a 10-book mega series. First sequence is going to be 6 books. Second sequence is going to be 4 books. No, only the skeleton of that is plotted. Not all the specifics are done. There is not some huge outline that I'm hiding away in a safe somewhere. And here's the blurb that Caitlin was talking about. And this was came out on September 22nd. You can find it in ebook and in physical copies, whether it's on Amazon or in various bookstores, various online retailers. And actually, I have it on good authority that Amazon is running a 99-cent sale right now in the US. I don't know if that's in other countries, but that's 500 pages of epic fantasy for just 99 cents. And I think that's a great deal. So I'm glad that they're doing that. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
That is, first of all, awesome with the 99-cent deal. And did I hear you correctly? A 10-book series?
Yes, this is supposed to be a 10-book series. When I set out to write this, this is getting back into the history of the book and why I got started on Divinity's Twilight. I originally went to college for mechanical and aerospace engineering. And so this all started 8 years ago when I was in a thermodynamics lecture, and I should have been listening to the professor. It wasn't that he was boring or anything.
I'm having thermodynamics flashbacks.
Oh, you are? What did you take? What was your degree in?
I took environmental sciences, but my not undergrad, what's it called? Minor was in atmospheric and oceanic sciences, which is contrary to what I thought it was. All thermodynamics. So
well, the reason that the engineering background was great is what I do in Divinity's Twilight is it's a combination of magic and science. That there is a very distinct blood and bone magic, which uses a particle carried on the bloodstream called Marr. And then there's also a magtech component, which is people, as society has evolved, have, instead of going down the oil, the gas, and the burning fossil fuel route, they've taken a magical resource called Illyrium and harnessed its energy to through thermodynamic processes and all of that, steam energy, to run their airships and their electricity and their shields and their lights and all the other cool stuff that you get in a steampunk, slightly more modern universe. But the key part of this thermodynamics lecture that I was talking about, I flipped over my handout that day and I started doodling a map that I started with the geography of the world. I set up all the different nations, the races, where they were going to be on this map, what river valleys they had originated along, and a bunch of other cool features, including I have this great divide across the middle that was created by clashing magical forces that thrust up this giant mountain range. And so that's, in terms of strategy, military tactics, trade, this has a significant effect on the people of the central continent. But so that's where I started with the map. I wrote the first 2 chapters of the book, and then I got distracted. That writing was fun, but it's half work because you have to put effort into it. You have to outline. You have to make sure your characters are working, your plot's working, even your prose. In your day-to-day, your sentences have to be coherent, that they have to engage the reader. You can have the most interesting subject matter possible in a fantasy novel, but if you start every sentence the same way, they're going to get turned off. And so there's work involved. And I decided, well, I'm doing engineering during the day. Do I really want to be spending my free time writing? So I put it aside for another 5 years. And then 3 years ago, I read a book about getting to yes. It was a self-help book. And I read the first chapter. It essentially just said, just say yes to whatever your dreams and passions are. I said, oh, I'm going to finish this book. I did. I know that it's not that easy for everyone, but I'm glad it was that easy for me.
That is such an interesting story. And I just want to say that I need to stop doing these interviews because I have way too many books that I want to buy, because, oh my goodness, that sounds so interesting. I just love the idea of the magic as a resource. Like, that is so cool. I need to stop buying books, except I am going to buy this one.
The secret to it is I created a fantasy universe because I wanted to write about airships. Though I don't bore anybody about that. I realized very early on that I can't go into all the geeky technical stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. You sound like kind of like a world building kind of person. So, I know this is like
everybody likes to compare my works to Sanderson. That they say that I'm the world building guy, at least within the IndieVerse that they've seen. There's plenty of other people. Like I know you had Justin Fike on recently.
Yes.
And he and I did a quiz show with Joe a couple weeks ago, and he is big into world building on the Byzantine Empire combined with a fantasy setting, which I find absolutely fascinating, not fantasy. I find absolutely fascinating because I love the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire. The first book that I started writing that I never finished was a historical fiction called First Legion, which was a what if Julius Caesar wasn't assassinated. But again, world building guy, I got bored with that because while you can create your plot and you can create characters aside from the ones that are historically relevant, you are handed your weapons, you're handed your armor and your culture and your ships and everything. That you don't get to create them yourself by combining all the things you thought were cool.
Oh gosh, I'm a world build. I love world building. So like we could talk about this for ages.
Next show.
Yeah, next show. We'll jump into world building. Actually, we might just go down that route because I talk to a lot of folks who are very, I suppose, character oriented. And so, yes, I love to geek out about world building. But you touched on it a little bit in kind of your introduction there with regards to like how you got started in this book in particular. But I was curious, like, was that your writer origin story? Is this something that you wanted to do very early on, or did it come later in life? I love to always ask people because a lot of folks that I know, you know, it's something they know they've wanted to do for a long time, but there's occasionally the person who like had their writer origin story a little bit later in life. So I'm always curious. You want to take us back and tell us a little bit about your writer?
Well, I've always flirted with it to a certain degree. That when I was in elementary school, I went to a mini kids writers convention. That it was so you submitted an extremely short story. I forget how long it was, but mine was about undersea creatures and an adventure they went on. I don't remember much aside from that, but I submitted this. I was accepted to this program. And we went off to offsite to a convention center, to an auditorium, a stadium, and they had a bunch of local authors there. And we went through small little workshops. We got to ask them questions about their career, different things like that. I had a lot of fun, but I was still only an elementary school student. I think this was third or fourth grade. And after that, didn't do a lot of writing. I've always enjoyed writing essays or writing for not doing book reports. Nobody likes book reports because everyone just likes reading. We don't like doing anything with it. But I went on and I loved English essays about various epics or history. Everybody hated those 5-paragraph essays, but I didn't really mind them, where you had to synthesize information about the Cold War or about World War II or the Great Depression, whatever the subject was in your American history class, at least here in the US. For our international viewers, you probably had your own set of things about your own history, about world history that you did. And so I always maintained my writing skill, especially because my mother was an English teacher and she wouldn't let me drop the ball on that, which also probably influenced me to a certain degree. But I didn't really pick it back up until high school, and I was influenced by video games. The one in particular that led to First Legion was Rome Total War, that I loved the 4Ks, which the 4K games are your Conquer, Culture, Civilization, Expand. I forget exactly what they are, but it is your civilization builders, the ones where you take control of a nation from either the dawn of time or a specific period in history, and you try to bring them to greatness. And I wanted to take that video game experience and put it into a book with First Legion. And I settled on the what if scenario with Julius Caesar because I'd been reading a few authors that do what if scenarios. Harry Turtledove does, he has the war that came early where France and Great Britain say they won't give the Sudetenland to Hitler, which was an event that occurred before World War II. That they had a policy of appeasement towards Hitler and they gave it to him. Well, they don't in this, and it kicks off World War II early because Hitler just wanted to fight, essentially. There's other people that write alternate histories, and I thought that was really cool, that you take one little event, you change it, and you see how the dominoes fall from then on. And that's sort of what you do in fantasy as well, except for you have a lot more leeway with your plot, your characters, your setting, everything, that you can be a lot more inventive. But so that was how I got into First Legion. And then the reason I got into Divinity's Twilight many years later in college was I read a series by a lesser known Tor author. So Tor is under Macmillan. And this was Adrian Tchaikovsky. He is a British, he's a professor of literature, I believe, but he writes books as well. Similar to Sanderson, they both are professors on the side. And his series is called Shadows of the Apt. And he's a big world builder as well, because he has two different things. One, all of his different races are based upon insect ancestors, that they all have an inherited trait. The wasps are able to shoot stings from their hands, so bolts of energy. And then they also have wings that allow them limited flight. And so that's, of course, going to affect your culture. It's going to affect your warfare. It's going to affect your trade, everything. And then there's beetles that are very hardy. There's ants that are able to communicate telepathically. But then alongside this, he also has magic is basically draining away from this world. It is fading. And in its place, technology is rising. That an industrial revolution is going on. He has an alternate source of gunpowder, which basically uses compressed air. He has steam tanks. He has all this cool, wonderful stuff. And I really thought it was interesting, the interplay of technology and these inherent abilities of the races, because on top of their traits, there was the inapt and the apt, which is where Shadows of the Apt comes from. And the idea there was the inapt races were the magical races, the ones that could understand the arcane and the mystical, the sorceries. And then the apt were more technologically capable. That an inapt person would approach a doorknob on a door, and they would not be able to interact with the doorknob because it is a mechanism. That they would literally not be able to go through a door that is blocked by a door with a doorknob, while the apt person would. And so this was an interesting conundrum, that he basically altered the mental and genetic makeup of his people to follow these two general classifications. And I wanted to do something similar in Divinity's Twilight, where the technology is important, the races are important, and that you have two dueling systems. In my case, it's the two dueling systems of magic.
That's so, just bringing us along on that kind of like story and your inspirations is really, it's really interesting to hear. And also I am not familiar with that author, and that work sounds really interesting because I really do like the kind of interaction between magic and technology, or magic and magic, like you mentioned, that happens in Divinity's Twilight. No, so sounds like it's something that you've been toying with for a long time, but it's come to fruition recently, I suppose.
Yes. Oh, there was just a little bit of lag.
Oh, no. Yeah, it happens. And it might be happening on my end. So that's a really interesting origin story. And I know you're kind of like, you had a release recently and you kind of did an ebook release and then a paperback release. So I suppose you're kind of in the midst of book marketing. So I was wondering, like, what interests you the most when it comes to book marketing? Because I feel like it's such a large topic that can sometimes be very intimidating.
I'd say my two favorite spheres are live interaction, coming on, doing shows like yours, and being able to interact with fans, people that are enthusiastic about your work, other authors, that there is a great big social community that supports each other, that is building up, whether it's regular books or indie books, self-published books. There are a lot of people that you can go out and meet and interact with and coordinate with. But I'd say that my other favorite part of book marketing is interacting with reviewers, with bloggers, with the type of people that you might meet through Bookstagram. Probably my biggest community outside of Facebook is Instagram. And where my goal is to go out and meet a whole bunch of different people that I think will be interested in my book. And that's probably my biggest marketing tip for people, is don't be afraid to talk to people. That should be basic social interaction, that you want to go out and talk to people, to pitch your book, to get them interested in you and in your brand. But you can't be afraid of getting no response, getting a negative response, a bad review, because if you think that you have a quality product, you have to be confident in it, that you need to put it out there for people. And if you get one positive response in 10 that they want to read and review your book, that's great. And so I think that that's always been a fun part of what I do, is finding all the people that I think are going to be interested in my work, that are going to like this brand of epic fantasy, and reaching out to them.
Meeting people. I love meeting people, so I completely agree. And on that note, though, subtle plug for you, all of Chris's information is linked down below. So if you're interested in connecting with Chris, make sure you go and click all of those links and follow all of those, like, Instagrams. And I think your website is there too. So make sure you go down below to follow. And I think that's sometimes something that can get lost when talking about book marketing is, like, I guess the mind can immediately jump to, like, social media and newsletter marketing and ads and this and that, and skipping over the people aspect can be detrimental. And it's a great, I mean, this is a great reminder for me, just because when all of that other kind of more technology based stuff becomes overwhelming, like, ultimately it does come back to people, and the best kind of marketing is still word of mouth. So
And mentioning that, one of the things that you talked to me about preparing for was, what did I think the most important thing about book marketing was? And that is that
I love it.
You as an author are a brand, that people aren't just buying your books, they're buying you. For example, and I keep using Brandon Sanderson because he's my favorite author and he's one that I've studied a lot. But if you look at his books now, what is the first thing that jumps out at you about them? Have you ever looked?
Fantasy? The covers?
Well, the covers are always great. Michael Whalen and his paintings are amazing. But at the top is Brandon Sanderson, that he has grown to the point that his name as an author is more important than the individual title of the book or even the book series. And so you as an author are a brand. Kaylin Rivers is a brand. Christopher Russell is a brand. Justin Fike, who I mentioned earlier, is a brand. All of us have a specific style of story, style of writing, character development, setting that fans keep coming back for, that they want to read more of. And so that is what you're putting out there. And then if you go on live shows, if you do text interviews, if you do anything, your personality and the way you present yourself to the world is also a brand. And people will want to, if they think that you have great advice, or that you're easy to get along with, or you tell good jokes or something, they'll want to show up for that as well. And so there's a bit of balancing your writing with your persona, with whether or not you're putting out live content. For me, and for many authors, we prefer to focus on the writing element. That's why on my website, a lot of my blogs is free content that I put out, excerpts from either Divinity's Twilight or other short stories or projects that I'm working on coming forward. And I want to get that out to people. But there's also the human element. And the way I play into that is that I have 4 Shelties and I love dogs. And so I always try to put out 4 new Sheltie pictures with every newsletter that I go out. And uncannily, 3 of them are named after characters from the book. So you have Valen, Mira, and Mateo. I always forget the last one. But so you can actually see here, and it's going to be blown up on my website, my author picture. This is Valen. So Valen is my personal dog. And he and I are basically like glue. He's probably outside the door right now. Otherwise,
I love puppies. Bring them in.
Mm-hmm. But no, so people want to hear about you. They want to see that you are a living, breathing person just like them, that you have hobbies and interests and things beyond your writing. And of course, the writing is the most important element, but we like to connect with people. And that's how you establish a loyal fan base, is being available.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, especially in the like age of information, and people want that access to authors, and sometimes it's easy to forget that your brand is not just your book, it's also you. And also making sure that your personal brand aligns with the novels that you write is sometimes difficult to manage to, at least for me. So I guess, I mean, that answers the question about like what the most important marketing strategy is out there. You did kind of touch on it already, but there are so many parts to marketing. If you had to kind of exclude the people part, because I think that is your clear favorite, what would be your next, like, this is the thing I really like to do when it comes to marketing? What would be your kind of go-to strategy, I suppose?
So I'd say, and again, I'm going to caveat this for the audience, this depends on your level of financial investment in your books, if you are publishing. My favorite thing is to try to get the most value out of my dollar through ads. That I'm an engineer first and foremost. I enjoy statistics. I enjoy studying these things, figuring out patterns, and seeing connections. And so I like to go to BookBub. BookBub is probably my favorite site. And I see what authors are trending. What there's different ways that you can run an ad on BookBub. And I'll start this. I'll go through a full explanation. So a BookBub ad is a tiny little set of pixels. It's going to look like this. It's going to be a square. You can either come up with your own graphic, or you can submit a cover for one of your books and they will create a graphic for you. It's going to be a template with typically a faded background and a big red button that says, "Here, buy me." And you can put 99 cents or whatever you want in that little button. If you create a graphic for yourself, I'd suggest using a tool like Canva, or I believe there's a few other ones that are comparable, but I forget them.
Canva's great.
Flee from my mind.
We love Canva.
Yes. And so you go in, you create a catchy little ad. You can either target a 99-cent sale, or you can talk about reviews that your book has received, or you can say comparable to X, Y, and Z author. But my favorite thing about BookBub is rather than targeting the interests of viewers, you can target the authors that they're interested in. Because again, this comes back to brand loyalty. If people love Brandon Sanderson, and they run out of Brandon Sanderson books to read, they're going to be looking for the next comparable author that they can read that is like Brandon Sanderson. And so I have a very high click-through rate, which is one of the 2 methods of getting your ads out there. You can either go by impressions, which is just volume, just throwing it out in front of as many people as BookBub possibly can. Or you can go with click-through rate, where you only get charged if they click on your ad. And so I focus on click-through rate, and I target various authors that write similar things to mine. So Brandon Sanderson has a very high click-through rate for me. Andy Peliquin, who does military thrillers and science fiction, has a very high click-through rate for me. And so you start to see, well, these are the authors that I am not these authors, but that have similar content to what I produce, and other people have liked them, and they will probably like my content as well. And so it targets your marketing. It gives you a good bang for your buck. And so if you're interested in statistics, that's the BookBub method. The Facebook method is you can target authors, you can target genres, you can target things like that. Then there's Amazon. But I think BookBub gives you the most information as an author to be able to target your ads.
That is such an interesting answer. And I have dabbled in both BookBub and Facebook ads, a little bit more success with Facebook ads. However, I loved the BookBub ad platform. Exactly what you mentioned there about targeting authors, like it was so intuitive. And I will get back to, I'm not running any ads now, but I will get back to trying to figure those out. And this has really inspired me to kind of go back to BookBub, because oftentimes you hear Facebook and you hear Amazon, and BookBub is left out of the conversation a little bit. So that's like super interesting to me. So that was your favorite, other than people.
Yes.
When it comes to your least favorite.
So we go from flesh and blood, human interaction, to cold hard data.
To cold hard stats. Let's go. Well, that's at least like those are two very different things, and I suppose it's very good that you like both. Flipping it the coin, because there's so many different parts to marketing. What would you say is your least favorite, or something that you find the most difficult?
I would say that consistency, because this comes back to social media. Social media has algorithms, and I'm sure that you've heard this, everybody complaining about the Instagram algorithms changing about a month ago, where if people aren't saving your posts, then you're not going to get any distribution. It's not going to get any visibility. And people, you either have to galvanize your fan base and get them to understand this, or you just have to rely on sheer chance. But I'd say that my least favorite thing is those algorithms, because it forces you to keep a extremely consistent schedule. That if I want to post, I'd say that I post on average about 4 days a week. And then I run into a stretch where I'm extremely busy, whether it's with writing, or I'm going to go and do a book signing, or I'm going to be out of town for family affairs, or like with our scheduling, I'm putting in an irrigation system with my father. If anything gets in the way and you can't post, or you're too tired to post, or something gets in the way of life, I keep saying that, people are going to not see your post that day. They're not going to click on it. You're not going to get any attention to your page. And if that persists, well, Facebook's algorithm decides, well, I'm not going to put you in front of these people anymore. That you're not important. You're not producing anything. You don't have any value to me. And so you drift further and further out of the public eye, and then you have to fight to get back. That if people are already going to your page, that's great. If you're relying on ambient people coming in, whether it's through hashtags, whether it's through ads or whatever, you're going to lose some of that. And so it's for people that are extremely good at keeping to a schedule and not allowing that to affect them. The algorithms are great. It's going to keep putting their content in front of their fan base. If you have a hiccup, a hijink, something that stops you from posting with regularity, the algorithms are going to hurt you. And so I'd say that facet of social media is my least favorite part of marketing.
Yes, the algorithms are unforgiving. That is for sure. Very similar to YouTube. YouTube's all about posting consistently. And then YouTube also very much likes certain things and very much doesn't like other things. For example, they much prefer video content to live streams. And they'll promote video content over lives quite frequently. So yes, dealing with that.
And then with clickbait, like your title for this really should be Christopher Russell's top 10 marketing secrets to make you millions through indie publishing.
Yes, we got to go with the clickbaits and the like out there thumbnails for sure. I do see I'm going to take a pause. We do still have a few questions left. I see there are some people watching. If you do have any questions for Chris, please drop them down in the comments. Yes, the comments, the live chat on the side there. Moving on from your favorites, least favorites, a huge part of marketing comes down to book covers and book blurbs. And I know for people specifically, and by people specifically, I mean me, book blurbs are super fun, but at the same time, extremely nerve-wracking. And I find it very hard to know what to include and what not to include. So in your opinion, and when you approach a book blurb, how do you choose what to include? How do you go about writing your blurbs?
So I'd say it depends on the focus of your story. For an epic fantasy, you have a lot more leeway in not being direct. For example, this comes back to writing in general. So there are three main things that are going to be in any book, which are your characters, your setting, and your plot. Those are the three pillars of story writing, especially fantasy, where setting turns into world building. And so typically characters are the most important part of that, because people are going to attach themselves to a character that they find relatable, that they find interesting, and that's going to carry them through your book or your series. That is going to be their touchstone for what you do. And so a lot of book blurbs focus on the character, that you start off with whether I or not, I'm just going to create some. So Gavin was a Knight Templar, and then everything went wrong. He lost his rank, his lands, his title, and he was thrown into a dungeon to be tortured by the Inquisition. Gavin's only hope was the maid that came by and put a basket in his window every day. And one day there was a note in that basket. Does Gavin have a chance for escape? Something along those lines. So you focus on the character, and of course, I probably made missteps with that verbal cue that I just made up on the spot.
Oh, it was great. I want to read all about Gavin now. I'm like, wait, this sounds so interesting. I love it.
Well, those are your hooks. So your first hook is Gavin as a character. You immediately feel sympathy for him because he's been unjustly thrown in jail. Even if you don't know maybe he was justly thrown in jail, but you're telling this story from Gavin's perspective.
Right.
And so then you tie, somebody apparently likes Gavin, that this maid has dropped a basket. So we like Gavin because somebody else likes him, that this deals with character likability. And then you have the plot. Well, these Knights Templar, they're vicious. That why isn't there any due process? Why didn't he get a court date? Why wasn't there anyone to defend him? And so there's these different hooks that make the reader curious. And so with Divinity's Twilight, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to do the top portion, because I do something very focused on plot, then I do focused on setting in the bottom. That I actually, aside from the backstory characters, I leave off characters entirely, because I am focused on introducing you to the world in this first volume. With Divinity's Twilight Book 2, it's going to be character-based, because I'm going to be focusing on the characters that I introduced to you in Book 1. And part of the exposition, the starting portion of an epic fantasy, is figuring out who your characters are, because there are multiple points of view, there are multiple nations involved, there are multiple different sides, different factions, different viewpoints that you're going to be getting, who is right, who's wrong, etc. But the first part of this is a teaser to get you to read the rest of the teaser. A world consumed by war, an ancient evil resurrected, a millennial bargain comes due. When two blades clash, the third will fall, and the fate of all will be jeopardized. To save Lazaria, the failures of the past must be atoned for by a new generation of heroes. The time has come for mortals to cast off sight and, in doing so, truly come to see. So it's more lyrical, it's more poetic, that you're getting those few big hits. This is what the series is going to be about. There is going to be a war. There is going to be an ancient evil, some sort of prophecy. And there's also going to be a bargain, some sort of cosmic force, that there's a lot of mystery and mystique. And for me, especially with epic fantasy, maybe with fantasy in general, I love when there's a mystery element, when something's wrong with the magic, when something's wrong with the world, when you don't know why people did things in the past or why the gods have disappeared. That's something with Divinity's Twilight. That's literally where the names comes from, because 700 plus years before the start of this series, the gods just up and vanished. There was a creator and 7 Vanir that were managing the world for him. And for some reason, they have left for parts unknown. Maybe they took a vacation. Maybe they went to the Caribbean to sit on a beach. Everyone wants to find their beach. But there's narrative hooks.
Yeah, no, I mean, it had me hooked for sure. And I definitely, when it comes to blurb writing, struggle a little bit. And that just sounded fantastic. Even the one that you just came up with off the top of your head was really interesting. And I like
so talking advice then. So those 3 things I mentioned: characters, world building, plot. Characters are always the strongest one, because people relate to either people that are like them or that they want to like. But if you make any of those 3 stand out, you can hook a reader. Right. Because there are plot readers, there are world building readers, there are more character readers than both, but just do a good job with whichever of those you pick. And if you can blend more than one, then you're set.
I really like that piece of advice, because sometimes it's so hard to pick a place to start. So taking a look at those three and then saying, you know, this is the one that I suppose you go with the one that you feel is the strongest in the novel, or which you're trying to convey the most. Like you said, in this one, it's about the world building. It's the start to an epic fantasy. So
and
go
for
with
me
that one.
particularly, and this isn't trying to spoil my book, part of the reason I do that is I'm trying to obfuscate. I'm trying to hide what the main viewpoint is until about, I'd say, 15% into the book. That I'm giving you different perspectives and inviting the reader to sympathize with them before saying, this is going to be our primary viewpoint going on.
Right. No, that's super. I mean, I feel like that, like you said earlier, is like, it's something very distinct and unique about epic fantasy, that there are kind of these other elements that we can play with. So blurbs can almost, again, at least for me and other folks that I talk to, sometimes they just never feel right or 100% done, or like there's always like little tweaks that can be done. So I'm curious about, like, how do you go about revising a blurb, and when do you say, like, okay, this is ready, this is it?
So for Divinity's Twilight, for Divinity's Twilight Rebirth, I should say, because Divinity's Twilight is the series, I did 3 different blurbs. And ultimately, the final one was a combination of the final 2, I want to say. And so I wrote a blurb, first-person blurb from the perspective of a minor POV character. That was sort of an overview, what they had experienced with the world. It was, I think I called it "I am old," because the first paragraph starts with a little line, "I am old," and yada da 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 da. This is why I'm old. This is what I've seen. These are the tragedies and horrors that I've experienced. And the next one was, "I am tired," and yada da 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 da. So the description that spins out from that. And my goal is to always have a blurb come in under 250 words. So too wordy, let's go back, let's cut adverbs, adjectives, get rid of unnecessary articles, etc., and parse it up. And I was like, okay, so this is pretty good. And I shopped it around to a few people, alpha readers, beta readers. They enjoyed it, thought it was missing something. So then I wrote a second first-person one, and I was mimicking Sanderson, The Way of Kings, when I was doing this, because his first book, The Way of Kings, has a first-person introduction, then a third-person segment. And so targeting epic fantasy readers, I wanted to do something similar. So second one, I do the villain. I did a villain's perspective, the primary antagonist for Divinity's Twilight. And so talks about why he did what he did, how he ended up in prison, yada da da, and you reach the end of that, and his hope for a new beginning, for getting out, for fulfilling his ambitions and dreams. Because I try to have relatable villains, that they have more noble ambitions but ignoble means. That if you've ever read anything by Machiavelli or heard of him, I like Machiavellian villains.
Yep.
But
love
so
that.
and so that was the second one, villain's perspective. Still was lacking something, because it was grounding people in a character and giving you like veneer. That's the demigods under the creator, and it was giving you Harmuth, the big battle, and it was giving you, well, here's Illyrium and Elysium and these different important resources or artifacts. But it was giving you snippets, not really explaining anything, and the hooks were there, but it didn't really describe the history. So the final one that I settled on was, you have your cool little hook that I just read, the top one, the poetic one, and then it was a description of the setting, so both the historical setting and the current technological and geopolitical setting. And so a lot of people have latched onto that. A lot of people said it was really good, whether they were tagging the Facebook ads, whether they were replying to different things in different places. But in that particular case, it's just choosing what you want to talk about and honing in on it. So I started with 2 character blurbs, and I realized that those were lacking something. And so I switched over to a plot and world building blurb, and people like that better, the alpha readers, the beta readers, and that just comes from that being a position of strength for the book, for me personally as well.
That is so it's interesting to hear that you went through kind of three different blurbs and got feedback on them all. And that's just really interesting to me because I feel like I wrote the blurb and did the whole feedback part, but having the different blurbs sounds like really interesting and kind of experimenting with which one works best and resonates best with readers, I suppose.
And again, that is the approach for me for epic fantasy, that I have short stories set in Divinity's Twilight that people can get through story origin and through different things. And my blurbs for those are targeted on the characters that are the primary POV for those short stories.
Right.
That they're character oriented, that you stay in one person's head the entire time. So it's important that you root yourself in their perspective, in their ambitions, their goals, their motivations. Now, if you have a lot of POVs for an expanded work, which is Divinity's Twilight Rebirth, it's more important for people to understand the world that the characters are going to be in. At least that's what I think.
That's super interesting. And like you were saying earlier, it's like tailored towards the kind of what you're trying to convey in the story. No, really, really interesting. And I think I'm definitely going to kind of like take this approach moving forward and maybe try to write blurbs like from each of those like plot, character, world building, etc., and then seeing how it all fits together. I'm finalizing a blurb right now, so like, thank you. This is so relevant.
Oh, also another thing. Oftentimes you can take a tagline, 1 or 2 sentences, and expand it into a blurb. For example, my tagline for Divinity's Twilight Rebirth is, what if the heroes of legend didn't save the world, but only delayed the inevitable? And so that very first paragraph past the poetic introduction is, this is why people think the heroes of legend saved the world. This was the big battle, the cataclysmic event. They supposedly stopped it, but we still have conflict. We still have war. And then some ancient force that they should have defeated is still around. It's still causing problems.
Yeah, I love, like, that's super interesting.
Actually, I think I just answered Maya's question.
You did just answer Maya's question there. And it's super
elevator pitch, 1 sentence. If you want to expand that, I would target what your book is like. So my expanded elevator pitch beyond the stuff about the heroes of legend is steampunk meets military fantasy, like steampunk meets military, steampunk meets sword and sorcery meets military thriller, and an epic fantasy with layered characters, deep world building, and a cosmic conflict that will upend everything the people of Lazaria know and cherish. So again, you have to, keeping this all in your head is also.
Yeah, keeping it all in your head and ready to go. Yeah, it's difficult for sure. So I guess coming back out of blurbs a little bit and going into marketing, I've only got a couple questions left. And again, for anybody in the audience, if you do have them, drop them in. What is the best piece of book marketing advice that you have ever received?
So I typically don't prepare for anything, but I prepared for this. I took notes. So, quoting myself, book publishing is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't leap at the first opportunity to publish without exploring numerous avenues.
I like that. I like that.
And so the reason that I bring this up is I am indie published, but I am with a small imprint. That a friend of a friend, I sat down, I interviewed with them. I liked their company, their motto, the way that they put out indie products, indie books. And so I went with them as an imprint. And so that was naive, ignorant me when I had gotten, so I'm happy with their performance. I'm not discrediting them at all. But so my initial experience with publishing was I went online, I looked up Tor. Tor is Sanderson's publisher, and I looked up Orbit, and I looked up several other fantasy publishers that are imprints under the Big Five. And they all had very crazy, very intimidating application processes. And this, I hadn't even considered getting an agent at that point. And the Tor one specifically was, send us in your first, I think it was, I want to say 10,000 words. Send us in your first 10,000 words. Send in a 10-page summary of the entire plot. And then send us in a cover letter about you as an author. And put it all in a manila envelope. And then don't contact us for 6 months. We'll contact you if we contact you. And so I was very intimidated by that. I thought, wow, there has to be a better way. And so I started looking out locally for different publishing options. And a friend of a friend knew a small imprint that was doing indie books. And like I said, sat down, had lunch with them, did my pitch. They liked it, and I went with them. And so now at this point, I have realized through all the people I have met through groups like Indie Fantasy Addicts, through Joe's Indie Connection, through all of the amazing network of author friends that I have made, that you can do your own formatting, that you can hire your own artist outside of an imprint. And I still retain all my intellectual property, to the cover, to the maps, to the work itself. But these are services that you can go get, and you don't have to contract through somebody else, that you're going to be doing the same process yourself. So self-publishing is a legitimate avenue, and it may be something that I do next, even instead of going through an indie imprint or going through traditional. But do consider all options, that if you don't have to have your book out immediately, try the agent route, submit to 1 or 2 people, submit to a couple publishers, and then sit on that book and go work on something else for the next 6 months while you're waiting to hear back. And then if that doesn't work out, you can either try again, or you can go find an indie imprint like I did, or you can self-publish. That there are a lot of avenues. Just do your research. Don't leap before you look, as the age-old adage says. And like I just said, it is a marathon. That if you want to make a career out of publishing fantasy books or any type of books, that this is going to be something you're doing as either a primary or secondary career for years, or perhaps the rest of your life. So it's okay if you take a little bit longer to get into publishing. Like I keep bringing up Justin Fike because I like his model. I actually haven't read his books, but I have looked into a lot of how he does publishing. That he wrote a whole bunch of books and then published them back to back to back in a quick sprint. With epic fantasy, that doesn't work as much, because 3 sword and sorcery books like Justin Fike's are equal to 1 500-page epic fantasy. So you probably want to publish an epic fantasy 1 to 2 a year, as opposed to those where you publish 3 or 4 a year. But you shorten the time. Especially if you're doing a blitz, you might have 2 or 3 weeks between your releases rather than 2 or 3 months. So there are, in addition to different methods of publication, there are different models of publication that play into that book marketing. That if you release a whole bunch of books at once with 2 to 3 weeks separating them, each subsequent book is your marketing. If you do 1 book release a year, you have to work a lot harder on your marketing, because you have to keep people interested. You have to maintain your visibility while you're waiting on the next book in the series. So all these different things are factors that play into each other.
I think, yes, that is so interesting to hear. And I think that actually answers my next question too, that if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before you clicked publish. So just such great insights. And I think something that, like myself and a lot of folks in the audience who are like new to writing and publishing, can really, really take to heart. I do see some questions popping up in the chat here, so I'm just going to let everybody know we're going to move to the Q&A with the chat. So if you do have questions, please drop them in there for Chris. And then before we go, Chris, I'll turn it over to you to let you promote whatever it is you want to promote, talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. But Maya has asked a question: have you ever done character art for marketing? If so, is it worth it?
I am, let me see what I have around here. Because I recently moved my office from downstairs, and so I'm trying to figure out what I have available to me. So if you look behind me, I'm going to figure out how to get out of the way here, in which direction. So
right there, I see it.
So these are what I take to book signings. They are poster boards, and I set them up on easels on either side of the table. And so here I have a collage of various pieces of character art from Pinterest. But character art that I've actually had commissioned, and I don't know if you can see this, this piece here by Celeste Francis Campbell is one of my main characters, Lilith. She's extremely skilled, competent, a little bit enigmatic, shy, and quiet, but she always says the right thing at the right time to keep the protagonists together, to keep their group from splintering. And so I've had that done, and I've had 3 other pieces done that you can find them all on my website. That is going to be in the shop section. You don't have to actually buy anything, but you're able to look at all the images. And it's also on my Instagram and on my Twitter, so you can follow those links to see the pictures. But I've had 4 pieces of concept art done. And the way that I market that is I said, give a free poster with every book that comes from my website, so every physical copy. I do raffles and giveaways for the posters in addition to physical copies. A bookmark comes with every physical copy, so what I was just showing you there. So nice bookmarks, a little bit bendy. And that's actually, it's not really a pet peeve of mine, but I don't like earmarking books. I used to love to earmark books when I was like 7 or 8, and I was reading the Redwall series, which was how I got into fantasy. That's a separate thing. Yes. And I would earmark all those pages, and I started tearing my pages and smearing the ink and destroying the bindings because I read the books so many times and did that. And every page had multiple earmarks because I'd stopped on them so many times. But when I got to be an adult and I got to writing fantasy and I cared so much about my library that I was building, I decided I didn't want to earmark. And nobody gives you bookmarks with their books. So I decided I'm going to give a free bookmark with every book. That is just something I'm going to do because I don't want people to suffer as I did, and I want to give them something cool. And so free poster, free bookmark. And if you show up to book signings and get it, I just hand you the poster. I don't even have to fold it and put it in the book. So that is, there's no creases, no lines, and people love that. Everyone's favorite is the airship. If you go and find it either on my website or those social media, people love the airship design. That goes with books at like a 5-to-1 rate over everything else. Even though all the other designs are absolutely amazing. Celeste is an extremely talented artist. Can't thank her enough for all the work she did.
And how did you go about finding your artist? Maya's asking, how did you go about doing that?
So friend of a friend, again. So through Facebook, I started to meet some authors. And this author was also with the imprint that I published through. And so I went, set up a meeting. This was at the start of coronavirus, so everything had already gone online. So we just had a, what is the other one other than StreamYard that everyone uses?
Zoom?
Zoom. So we had a Zoom meeting, talked through what we liked, and I have a Pinterest page of art that I feel inspired by. And so linked her into the Pinterest page, and she worked from that. And that's actually, if you see my cover here, so for Divinity's Twilight Rebirth, that is Chris McGrath, who has done work for Brandon Sanderson on his Mistborn series and for Jim Butcher on the Dresden Files. So amazingly talented artist. And I had the distinct pleasure of working directly with him because I'm an indie author and I didn't have to use the publisher as a go-between. And so we talked on the phone, we exchanged ideas. And so this is an incredibly, this was a geek out moment because he teaches his own art class. He's done amazing work for so many people. I've always wanted to have him do one of my covers. And I was so surprised when he said yes. So great little story there. But so worked back and forth with him, and most artists, if you go to them, if you present what you want, if you're the key thing is some of them will want some money up front, some of them will want it on the back end, but just sign a contract, just work it out with them. And as long as you have a great reputation as an author that fulfills your promises and your obligations, you're going to be able to get lots of people to do great things for you.
That's so cool about the cover. So cool. Totally geeking out there. Maya had one last question. And how long are your books? Do you suggest many shorter books in terms of marketing or 1 or 2 longer ones? And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. So
with Epic Fantasy, you're typically going to be starting at 350 plus pages, I'd say. So Divinity's Twilight is 500, including a glossary. Let me go and see the exact page count because I am just rounding. So 482, including the about the author, my glossary, which has stuff like military ranks and airship classifications and various other things that I think people would find important, like short descriptions of the various races. And actually a really cool formatting thing, if you end up getting the ebook, is that every time a word that's in the glossary pops up in the text, you can actually click on it and it will bring up a text box that has the glossary definition or whatever I have there.
That's so cool.
an extra cool little bit of world building that I never intended, but that helps. And then here are the maps, so that also counts towards it.
Gotta love a map.
But 482 pages, that it is 183,000 words, give or take. Your typical novel length in the indie sword and sorcery, I don't know what it's called, action adventure when it's not epic fantasy, but your typical 1 to 2 POVs that are more digestible fare, quicker to get through, they're going to average between 80,000 and 100,000 words, and those are going to be your 250 to 300 page books when you actually pull them up. Then, of course, you have door stoppers like Brandon Sanderson that are your 1,300, 1,400 pages. And the reason that he's able to sell those is, again, it comes back to that author brand, that he got people started on his smaller books, his standalone books, and now they stick around for the longer tomes. And so I think that I'm at a happy medium in between, that people are, it's going to take people longer to get through my books, but I think that they're going to enjoy the content, the complete story arc. For my prologue tends to be longer than other people's, but that you can either read the prologue or skip to chapter 1. What the prologue is dealing with is the events of 700 years before, the inciting incident for the story. And some people have said that they really enjoy that because it felt like they were always an insider to events, that they had seen the historical occurrence that typically gets referenced in other fantasy books. And one of the reasons I did that is everyone says show, don't tell. So I didn't want to constantly be referencing, oh, well, this obscure dusty tome of history that occurred 700 years ago. And this was the reason for why we have the 3 nations that are at each other's throat today. Well, I wanted to show that. I wanted to give you an epic Helm's Deep battle right at the beginning of the story. And that's what I went with.
Helm's Deep is the best battle of all time.
It is. And a lot of great things narratively going on there. I love the at the end where the light shines down and Gandalf shows up with the army. Gets me every time.
Yeah.
But so that's really your differences in length. Most indie books err on the 250 to 300 page length. But if you have a loyal following, if you give them a quality product, if people are there for epic fantasy and that they want something that is like a Brandon Sanderson Stormlight Archive entry, but is a third to half the length, well, that's where I'm trying. That's the niche that I'm carving out for myself.
Nice. That's awesome. So I guess a follow-up on Maya's question, just because I'm curious, is that your plan, like a few books or like one-ish book per year? Do you have a publishing plan for how many you want to put out, or are you playing it by ear?
So the publishing plan is 1 a year in Divinity's Twilight. And again, so 10-book series, so 10 years there. My other plan is the Divinity's Twilight is going to be the through line. I won't call it the magnum opus because that's your best work, and that's up for other people to judge, not for me. But it's going to be my through line for a wider universe.
I love that.
This wider universe is going to be connected by similar magic systems, hard magic systems. I'm a big proponent of those, like Sanderson. Still a little bit of soft magic in there as well because I have 2 different systems. But so I'm going to write standalones, I'm going to write trilogies, and I'm going to write other books in the series. For example, my goal is to have an Asian fantasy standalone come out next year before Divinity's Twilight 2. So if people are worried about these long series that, well, when is the author going to get the rest of them out? Can they finish a series? Can they stick the landing? Well, my goal is to have people chew on this standalone and that get them into Divinity's Twilight, because there's going to be a few Easter eggs that connect them, a few little hidden gems, a few hanging plot threads. So, and I may revisit those characters eventually, but it is intended to be a standalone to start with. And then I have in the IFA Advent calendar, we are doing a release of 25 authors in Indie Fantasy Addicts. Everybody is doing a short story under 10,000 words focusing on a villain point of view. And instead of pulling a villain from one of my series or one of my books, I decided to create a new world, new villain, new plot. And this is also going to be in the wider universe. So this is another touchstone. And then all the short stories are going to be there. And I hope to eventually release my own anthology of all my shorter fiction that takes place in this wider universe. So if you want to get the name of this wider universe, it does exist. I am not revealing it yet. It is going to be on that villain short story.
Nice. I love how you've kind of positioned everything to kind of come back to your like flagship series, I suppose. That's really going to be
that's the good word, flagship. Perfect.
The like pillar that runs through it. That's so interesting and a great way to get readers to plow through your backlist, because it'll be a backlist that relates to the story that they love. Really, really interesting. So, Chris, we are at an hour and we have answered all the questions, but I do want to turn it over to you before we like sign off to promote whatever it is you want to promote, say whatever you want to say. And for everybody watching live or in the future, all of Chris's information is linked down in the description box below. So make sure to go and follow on Instagram, go to the website, buy Chris's book, all those things.
Thank you so much, Jacquelyn. So I already plugged the IFA Advent Calendar. That's going to be a big book out in December. So back to Divinity's Twilight Rebirth. You can find this on ebook, all of the major websites. It is wide, so not just on Amazon. You're going to be able to find that through, like I said, BookBub, through Kobo, through Google, through Apple, your preferred ebook retailer. You're also going to be able to find Divinity's Twilight Rebirth at various stores. Go into your local bookstore or local Barnes & Noble, check with them. If they don't have it, you can actually ask them to carry it because it's through Ingram Publishing Services. So you can get them to bring it in and stock it. And that always helps, whether me or any indie authors that you know, ask them if they're published through IPS. And if they are, go to your local bookstore and mention that you'd like them to carry it. So again, front, and I always get it backwards because you're going into the camera. Yeah. There's the blurb on the back. And that is currently 99 cents on Amazon US. I don't know what it is anywhere else, but even if it goes back to its regular price, it's only going to be $2.99 for an ebook. That's a great ebook. Like I said, it has that special formatting with the glossary where you're able to check words in the back. And it is 500 pages of epic fantasy for either 99 cents or $2.99. And unless one of Brandon Sanderson's door stoppers goes on sale, you're probably not going to have a better deal page for price. And again, so that is epic fantasy. It is a combination of magic, a lot of races that you get with high fantasy, Lord of the Rings, 7 different races, a whole bunch of technology, a whole bunch of magic, from elemental to magnetic to song and illusion and conjuration. There's just a whole lot going on in Divinity's Twilight and a lot of great characters, and I think you guys will enjoy it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, and I cannot wait to check it out myself. Like I was saying earlier on, I have to stop doing these interviews because I had bought way too many books.
You can never have too many books.
This is true.
Because if you have too many books, that means you can build a book fort. And everybody loves book forts.
Everybody loves book forts. On that note, thank you so much, Chris. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who has joined us live or in the future. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the IndieVerse. Thanks, everybody. Bye.